Hey everyone, how's it going? Barok here with another video. Today is the long-awaited Elemental Shaman guide for Season 3. We're going to be coming over a lot of information, such as the season changes, talents, builds, consumables, stats for your builds, right? Trinkets, embellishments, crafted gear, stuff like that, your rotation, your spell priority for different scenarios, some add-ons, Weakauras that you might want to look at using, and some tips and tricks for Mythic Plus. But a lot of information. Timestamps are going to be in the video down below if you're interested in going through the sections. Please consider supporting my content if you guys want. Like the video if you like it, comment down below what your thoughts are. If you think I should do some new content, you have any ideas on what I should do next, all is welcome, would be appreciated. Subscribe for more stuff and hit the YouTube algorithm button with the notification bell. Also, Twitch and Patreon. If you guys want to support my content even further, I'll leave the links to those in the video description down below. Really helps us out, especially working on these bigger projects with my editor, David. Would really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. In Season 3, we leave behind the Lightning build as we lose the Tier 30 set bonuses. They are replaced with the Tier 31 set bonuses, which emphasize a more of a fire build talent setup for Raid and Mythic Plus. Tier 31 brings a lot more power behind Primordial Wave and Lava Burst, giving us a huge boost in spread cleave scenarios, as well as single target increase with the fire build, which in previous seasons was lacking quite a lot. In Season 1, when we played more of a fire build, it relied too heavily on deeply rooted elements procs to get any sort of competitive damage in like pure single target encounters. So this changes with this new tier set, as it's adding a huge damage increase to Lava Burst throughput, like just in general, which means that in this guide we will be only talking about like the best builds for the tier set and not any information about the previous season's lightning build, just so you know. That being said, you will want to break your current tier 34 piece as soon as you're able to get the new 4-piece for tier 31. Running 2-piece tier 30, 2-piece to tier 31 until you receive your full 4-piece is okay to do this far into the start of the season, because you're going to be able to essentially gain your 4-piece easily by like week 3 or 4. You can obtain your tier pieces through either Raid, the Gear Catalyst, your weekly vault by killing raid bosses, obviously completing Mythic Plus dungeons, or PvP. Our new 2-piece set bonus sends out a weaker Elemental Blast when we use Primordial Wave, but this Elemental Blast gives us all 3 buffs for a short amount of time, which is pretty sweet. Our 4-piece set bonus gives us Molten Slag, which is a damage over time effect tied to our Lava Burst that works kind of like combustion, so increasing its damage by how much damage the Lava Burst did. This dot is applied to every target hit by your Lava Burst, so we also, the 4-piece is actually kind of overloaded. We also get Molten Charge. So we have Molten Slag, which is the dot. Molten Charge is a buff that we get when we consume Primordial Wave. So after we cast the Lava Burst, that sends out all the additional Lava Bursts. This buff makes our next 2 Lava Burst casts send out weaker Lava Burst that hit up to 3 additional targets affected by our Flame Shock. Additionally, all these extra Lava Bursts generated from our tier set give us Maelstrom. They can overload from our mastery, and they provide cooldown reduction on our Primordial Wave ability through the talent Rolling Magma. We also have received notable talent changes, and we'll go over those as well. This being for Splintered Elements, now gives us 20% based haste and an additional 4% for each subsequent Lava Burst casted through our Primordial Wave. Further Beyond has also received quite a nerf, quite substantial nerf, due to an interaction with the tier set, essentially allowing permanent uptime on Ascendance and making it so that you really only wanted to cast Lava Burst and nothing else, which was pretty degenerate. This interaction was way too strong due to few components and further pushed the Further Beyond out of orbit, honestly. So along with the increase to Elemental Blast cast from the tier set by using just Lava Burst and Primordial Wave on cooldown, you could just essentially stay in Ascendance permanently, and this was just way too degenerate. So Further Beyond has now been capped at a maximum duration of 100% of its normal duration. All right, talent builds and setups. We'll first cover, I guess, Mythic Plus. So with the tuning changes from 10.1.7 to 10.2, along with the new tier set changes giving us more synergies with the wildfire build variations, if you guys remember that kind of name from season 1. This season we'll be playing a Mamma Mia meatball fiesta kind of thing, really. So this playstyle, it benefits from our passive cooldown reduction on our primordial wave and high haste uptime on splintered elements, which is a lot of fun. When it comes to Mythic Plus, we of course want to pick up talents that lead us to Stormkeeper, as it yields still a large amount of damage contribution through the dungeon. It's great low cooldown, 1 minute burst windows, great for Maelstrom generation. So pick that up by going into Inundated, Call of Thunder, and Unrelenting Calamity just to get it. Then you will want to go through the Eye of the Storm later on to allow us access to Primordial Wave, Rolling Magma, and of course Splintered Elements. These 3 talents will be your bread and butter for this season. On the fire side of the tree, we will want talents that provide a good balance between single target and AoE. This means we obviously want to play Fire Elemental to start off, and also pick up talents that increase our fire damage and lava burst throughput, like Echo of the Elements, Call of Fire, and improved Flame Tongue Weapon. We want talents that also help us spread and maintain our flame shocks. This is obviously really good. So Surge of Power is going to be great for that, along with Liquid Magma Totem are the go-to ones to spread our flame shocks. Then we also need the talents that provide damage boost to our other non-lava burst abilities. So these would be things like Master of the Elements, Power of the Maelstrom just by 1 point, you only need 1, and Magma Chamber. Putting a point into Power of the Maelstrom is kind of just the best option to bring us to the final row of talents. You're comparing it to something like Call of Lightning that reduces our nature spell CDR. We don't cast Lightning Bolt enough anymore, or Chain Lightning, so it's not really worth it. So finally, we pick up talents after Power of the Maelstrom, like Deeply Rooted Elements. The good procs that we get from this. It's fantastic. And Windspeaker's Lava Resurgence. Echo Chamber is kind of like the best boost in damage out of all the other options for our last available talent point, since we're valuing mastery a lot more this season. So put 1 point into Echo Chamber to finish things off. Moving on to single target. If you're looking to go into more of a raid build / single target build for Mythic Plus, there are 2 kind of options to look at. The first one we call the Windspeaker's Shocking Resurgence build. This is a heavy mobility build. This build obviously moves out of Stormkeeper to pick up Ice Fury and Electrified Shocks. It also goes into more Maelstrom generation talents like Flow of Power and Swelling Maelstrom, so you'd want to pick those up as well for this build. This build emphasizes a lot of mobility, like I mentioned, through instant cast spells, and almost all of its rotation is instant cast spells with Earthshock and Lava Burst with Lava Surge procs from Windspeaker's Lava Resurgence and Primordial Surge. So it's Meatball Heaven, Movement Heaven, and you really only ever cast Ice Fury. I know some people don't like Ice Fury. It's really only used when you have nothing else to press, and it's literally one of the only hard casting spells that you would use in this build. The second raid build that we would look at is something called Mountains Will Burn. So this build moves out of Windspeaker's Lava Resurgence to pick up its key talents of Elemental Blast, and Mountains Will Fall along with Aftershock. So this build steers towards a maximum mastery gear set and milks the tier set for all of its potential. What do I mean by that? So the idea is to have close to, if not 100% uptime on all 3 Elemental Blast buffs, and using Primordial Wave as much as possible. Aftershock in this build provides a little bit of an RNG boost to the uptime on your Elemental Blast buffs because of the Maelstrom refunds that you get when you use Elemental Blast. And Electrified Shocks in both of these builds will work to buff our spender spells like Earthshock and Elemental Blast. You will want to put 1 point into Elemental Equilibrium, since you can maintain that buff passively through your rotation quite easily. When it comes to council fights or spread cleave scenarios, which in this season is our Council of Dreams fight. So the current best builds that we're seeing on Warcraft logs is actually a variation of the Windspeaker's build, but with Splintered Elements and Primal Elementalist. This is because we are able to have a high uptime on both our Fire Elemental and the haste buff from Splintered Elements, bringing in a lot more passive damage boost to our regular rotation. For the Shaman tree, like our actual Shaman talents, obviously there's a lot of niche utility talents in our Shaman tree, but the main ones you want to grab are as follows. Obviously, our mandatory talents are going to be things like Astral Shift, which is our main defensive CD, Frost Shock, which is an extra button to press, but only mandatory if you're running an Ice Fury build in Raid, something that has Ice Fury in it. Plains Traveler, more uptime on Astral Shift is better. Obviously, we want that, so definitely take it. Ancestral Defense, more survivability. Nature's Guidance is kind of like our pseudo cheat death. I would recommend that because we are quite squishy. And Earth Elemental acts as a minor defensive with health increase, and it takes the pressure off of tanks in dungeons. Quite handy talent. Fire and Ice obviously is going to increase our damage throughput, and Elemental Warding makes us a little bit more tanky. We like that. Brimming with Life increases the health pool and lowers the cooldown on our Reincarnation, which is essentially another defensive cooldown at this point. And then Ancestral Guidance converts damage into additional healing, which is good. Nature's Fury increases the crit damage of our nature spells. This means Earth Shock and Elemental Blast are included on those things. Earthquake actually does physical damage, but it is considered a nature spell. Keep that in mind. And then obviously, if in Mythic Plus, your Chain Lightnings from Stormkeeper are going to be quite powerful with the Nature's Fury talent. Another talent that I want to talk about is Gust of Wind or Spirit Walk. So Gust of Wind would be the default choice as an Elemental Shaman since we are a ranged caster. It gives us a little bit more ability for that, but you could make a case for Spirit Walk because it can remove debuffs that daze and have a dot attached to them or applied to them. A couple examples would be like Entangling affix. The last boss of Uldaman put a slow or daze plus a dot on you, so you can remove that with Spirit Walk. Quite handy talent if you're not using, or you kind of need that extra mobility or to take those things off of you. Spirit Walker's Grace, a little less needed, honestly, this season, but you kind of want to get it for other reasons because being able to cast while moving is important, especially if you get Ascendance procs or Deeply Rooted Elements procs and you have to cast Lava Burst back to back anyway. So Spirit Walker's Grace is helpful for that when dealing with mechanics. Another one obviously is Graceful Spirit. You get cooldown reduction on your Spirit Walker's Grace, more mobility. We know that. Nature's Swiftness. This gives us a free cast nature spell, which is either could be your heal, could be Chain Lightning, Lightning Bolt, or Elemental Blast. We like that. Free cast of Elemental Blast. So definitely pick up Nature's Swiftness. And then Totemic Surge, it's better in my opinion than Go with the Flow. One, it reduces the cooldown on Liquid Magma Totem if in Mythic Plus, which is really good. And then it also gives us easier access to talents like Poison Cleansing Totem. So that's also a really good talent on certain weeks. So we'll talk about that. But it's better than Go with the Flow to pick up, since you're going to need to go into Totemic Recall, which is mandatory for Mythic Plus due to us running Liquid Magma Totem. So Totemic Recall, reset the cooldown on Liquid Magma Totem right away. It's fantastic. And then obviously you want to pick up Call of the Elements or Call of Elements, which puts Totemic Recall on a 2-minute cooldown instead of 3 minutes. Last one, I guess, would probably be Thunderstorm with Thunder Shock, always for Mythic Plus because it provides additional crowd control. Then of course we have our optional talents worth mentioning. Some of these would obviously be Chain Heal and Earth Shield and Elemental Orbit. These are usually paired together and taken all the time for raiding and raid progression. Earth Shield is quite strong for raid progression, so I'd recommend picking that up. Purge, very useful this season. There's a lot of dungeons that you need to purge off buffs, like in Waycrest Manor or in Atal Dazar, to name a couple. Cleanse Spirit is most helpful in dungeons like Waycrest Manor, Darkheart Thicket. You can make a case for it in Atal Dazar if the Voodoo Hexers get their hex off, right? That is a curse effect. Really good for that. It is also very good for Afflicted weeks, so I'd pick it up for that week if I was in a group for running Mythic Plus. Thunderous Paws or Spirit Wolf. This is kind of a flip-flop. So the Thunderous Paws can get you out of roots, like I mentioned, so Entangling or Dazes effects, which is if they have a dot tied to them, that's pretty good, just like Spirit Walk. And also works as a dispel for Entangling, like I mentioned. Spirit Wolf is great for indoor dungeons for the added mobility. If you can't mount, the stacking movement speed is quite good, but it also helps with bosses that have prolonged burst damage phases in raids. So Spirit Walk is quite good for things like, I guess, Farok. You could make a case for it in Council of Dreams as well. So it's a great boost for survivability if there's prolonged burst phases. Another mention, I guess, would be Capacitor Totem and Guardian's Cudgel. I use these most of the time, though you need to be careful if there are too many AoE stuns in the group already. We're already seeing a lot of groups run double Demon Hunter, Vengeance, and Havoc Demon Hunters that already have Chaos Nova, which is an AoE stun. So running Capacitor Totem with Guardian's Cudgel may not be worth it because of the DR that you'll get from that. So maybe run the cooldown reduction on Capacitor Totem instead if you need it. Windrush Totem, great boost in movement speed to help your group move out of mechanics and run faster when in indoor dungeons. This is also good for raiding as well. And Hex and Voodoo Mastery, I use these to get to Spirit Walk or Gust of Wind, preferably because Hex has like little value outside of CCing like incorporeal mobs of like affixes or padding mobs in dungeons, and if there's like no other CC available to interrupt a spellcast, if you can hex the target, that's fine too. I think it's much better than Winds of Alakir to get to those talents, so actually has a use. Poison Cleansing Totem, mentioned this a little bit ago, but most helpful in dungeons like Waycrest Manor, Throne of Tides, and Everbloom for poison debuffs on tanks. It's also extremely strong in afflicted weeks. It essentially makes the affix like nothing if you have a shaman in your group with Poison Cleansing Totem and Cleanse Spirit. So very good for that. And then Stone Skin Totem, optional, but exceptionally high value and underappreciated, I feel. Like Stone Skin Totem is actually really good in Blackrook Hold for the third boss, as you can essentially use it every time the boss stomps, or have the buff active every time the boss stomps if you timed it correctly. This damage reduction scales way better the higher the key you're going to be doing. Obviously, it's not that good in raid because it only affects up to 5 targets. So really only make a case for it in Mythic Plus. The higher the key you go, like I mentioned, the more it's going to be useful, the more damage it will reduce. So to recap on talents, I will show you which build you will want to play in Mythic Plus or Cleave scenarios, and which build you want to be using in single target raid encounters. They'll be displayed on screen for you. Consumables. We'll talk about consumables, stat weights, and stuff like that. So your consumables, your best potion you're going to want to use is obviously the Elemental Potion of Unlimited Power. This gives us intellect and quite a lot of it. Your file, you'll probably want the Tepid Versatility, not the file of Corrupting Rage. The drawbacks for Corrupting Rage are just not worth the slight, very slight DPS increase. I say that because like majority of your damage is already coming from Lava Burst, which already is critting, so you're not really benefiting from a whole lot of crit for your main damage source. The only thing that is benefiting is like your filler spells, I guess, and your spender spells like Earthshock and Earthquake, or in dungeons, obviously, Earthquake more, but Earthshock, Elemental Blast for single target, not really benefiting a whole lot from Corrupting Rage, and the Ticking Dot is scaled a lot higher this season, so I would recommend just running Tepid Versatility. It's also a cheaper option anyways, you can save some money. We do not use a weapon rune. You're going to be using improved weapon or improved flame tongue weapon anyway, so you don't need to spend your money on any runes, which is great. And for food, obviously the Faded Fortune Cookies, or Deviously, yes, deviously deviled eggs. Oh my god, that took me forever. So Faded Fortune Cookies or deviously deviled eggs are going to be your go-tos for single use food buffs. You could also obviously use feasts if they're cheaper. Let's talk about stat weights. So stat weights can be tricky this season, as we need to keep in mind that the amount of stats that we're getting from gear, because it's scaled way higher this season, and the massive jump in item level, it's nuts. So this means that we're likely going to be hitting harder diminishing returns quickly, and even hard capping on some of our stats like mastery and haste. So it is important to understand stat weights and diminishing returns properly and gear your character accordingly. Intellect is obviously our primary stat as Elemental Shaman, and Mastery is our highest weighted secondary stat by far this season. But for Elemental, the stat is hard capped at 100%. So with ability and gear procs like Elemental Blast, Adaptive Drakathis Arm Guards, which we'll talk about later, we want to stop getting Mastery hard, stop getting Mastery at like 88% base. So keep that in mind. Haste is our second best stat to gear for, and you should aim for getting around like 4,000 rating or more with this stat. We start to lose value on haste at around like 5,100 rating or like 30%. So that's also a really good percentage to aim for. And then versatility is our third best stat. So after you've reached the benchmark for your mastery and you're starting to get like a little bit more haste, look at versatility as your third best option. And we start to lose versatility at around 6150 rating, but we're probably not going to be getting there with mastery and haste being our two more important stats there. So try to ignore crit as best you can, but not at the cost of like a lot of intellect, since it's our primary stat. I would recommend that you learn how to simulate your character using Simulation Craft add-on and Raidbot's website to avoid this problem of wasting potential upgrades or wasting potential DPS. I have an old video in my YouTube channel that covers how to simulate your character accordingly. So to understand your current gear stat weights is important. I'll leave it in the cards of the section of the video so you can refer to that. It'll be in the top right corner of the screen, so you can check that out if you need to. All right, let's talk about trinkets, crafted gear, and embellishments. So for trinkets, the best all-around options are actually going to be from dungeons. So the Balefire branch gives passive mastery and an on-use damage amp, which is better than most available trinkets out there. And the Sea Star is another amazing dungeon trinket which provides base versatility. We're going to be gearing for that anyway once we get a lot of our mastery and haste, and the intellect proc is quite nice. There are also some great options from the new Amirdrasil raid, but these are not like overall better than the previous two. Balorrelos, the Sun Caller, yeah, is the best like pure single target trinket available, but however, it's not like a great option for Mythic Plus, and pretty much every other caster wants it, so good luck trying to get it. Pip's Emerald Friendship badge is a great overall trinket as well, although it can hinder us if we're already at mastery cap and then we get the mastery proc. It's kind of useless to us, so that's why it's not one of our number one, but it's great for when you're gearing, so keep that in mind. Still, it is better than most other trinkets, so there are alternatives that we mentioned here. Just keep all that stuff in mind. Your two best ones come from dungeons, so you're going to be grinding those a lot to get them. Crafted gear. So with the new season patch comes new spark items, obviously for crafting, along with the item level increase on crafted gear. It is more important now to know what items are like your highest priority so that you don't waste your early sparks, since you have a limited amount of them and how many you get. So your first priority for crafted items, I would say, would be your adaptive Dracothis arm guards. You're going to have these for the entirety of the season unless they get nerfed into the ground. These are by far the best embellishment and spark choice, as you're just gonna be using them the entire season. A second priority, I guess, could be the allied leg guards of Sansa Khan. So they sim the best and they buff your allies, which is kind of why, but I myself do not recommend them, since they force you into using the tier helm to get your 4 set, which when you're trying to gear and get mastery cap, not having mastery on your helmet is kind of hard because you get a lot of stats on your helmet, so I don't recommend them. Plus, they can also buff tanks and healers if you are too close to them, so in raid, that's not really ideal. You want to be buffing the DPS classes as best as you can with these if you're going to be using them. An alternative second craft, I guess, could be like your weapon if you don't get one early within like your first 2 vaults. Additionally, any armor slot that would be the highest upgrade, so like belt, cloak, right? Helmet, you could craft helmet. And then you can kind of put like a Shadow Flame tempered armor patch onto it, which is a great alternative as it provides like a solid boost to damage and single target. A takeaway would just be, honestly, like sim your character to see what the best second craft would be, but your first craft priority is definitely the Dracothis arm guards, which we're going to talk about now. So as mentioned before, the first priority embellishment would be the adaptive Dracothis arm guards, after which You can make a case for allied leg guards of Sans-Khan. If you have enough mastery, this is a good secondary option. Your all-around like best single target embellishment is actually surprisingly the Witherrot Tome, which is simming on par with the Hailstorm Treads, but without all of its drawbacks to movement speed. So if you need a little bit more single target and you're not going to craft something like a gear slot with the Shadow Flame Tempered Armor patch, maybe look at the Witherrot Tome as an alternative for that. And then later in the season, you could make a case actually for Lariat if you have like 6 or more sockets available, but the Lariat actually loses value once you obtain your best in slot neck, which is the Eye of the Rising Flame. It just provides so much base mastery and a little bit of haste, which is the 2 stats that we want. You could also say like, oh, I want the Lariat to proc like verse or haste from like its proc rate, which is it's good. You would rather have it proc those 2 stats if you're already at mastery cap and not proc mastery, so you can prioritize your gems to make the Lariat proc versatility or haste, which I think would be a good option. Another alternative, like I mentioned before, could be like the Shadow Flame Tempered Armor patch, as you can run like any crafted gear with that on it. And then maybe look at Venom Steep Stompers, I guess, if you're struggling to reach mastery cap while you're gearing at the start of the season. They give good stats, it's okay. All right, our spell priority and rotation. We're going to be going over a lot of information in this section. So with Elemental Shaman and the new tier set, we are inclined to press Lava Burst just as much as possible. This can be really engaging when you have multiple targets affected by your Flame Shock and you have so many instances of Lava Burst flying out to all these different targets thanks to our Primordial Wave and the extra cast of Lava Burst that we get from our new tier set. It's important to keep in mind that with all these additional Lava Burst casts, their overloads and from our mastery, it's a lot of extra Maelstrom generation. So UE can cap quite quickly on targets like as low as 3 target count. So this means just it's important to get used to the new Maelstrom generation speed and plan your next cast accordingly. Our rotation differs like a lot when we are in raid and in single target scenarios compared to in Mythic Plus boss counters. So we're going to be going over what your spell priority looks like for raid builds and then Mythic Plus builds in hopes of alleviating as much confusion as possible. We first want to talk about our opening rotation on bosses, and then your opening rotation is assuming you are going to be running the raid builds mentioned previously, like the Mountains Will Fall, or sorry, the Mountains Will Burn, or Windspeaker's Shocking Resurgence builds. Afterwards, we can showcase the regular spell priority on screen, and I'll be providing some commentary in more of a simplified format of explanation for you. Your opener for raid or single target is going to be like, just make sure you cast Nature's Swiftness anytime before the pull. Cast your Fire Elemental 3 seconds before the pull into a Ice Fury 1.5 seconds before the pull. This is going to be your pre-cast spell. Then you're going to finish Ice Fury cast into a Primordial Wave instant cast, Lava Burst again, then another Lava Burst because you're going to have a Lava Surge proc. Then you can cast Frost Shock to get Electrified Shocks buff on the target and give you a little bit more Maelstrom. Cast Lava Burst again, and then finally Elemental Blast if you're spec'd into it. This would be Earth Shock if you were spec'd into Windspeaker's Lava Resurgence and not Elemental Blast. Okay, for your raid spell priority or your single target spell priority, you're going to see that the spell priority itself is on screen, but in this rotation, you are primarily trying to get Primordial Wave off cooldown as quickly as possible to maintain the Elemental Blast buffs that you get from it. In the Mountains Will Burn build, your goal is to be at 100% mastery permanently, which is easy to do if you are just at the soft cap of 88%. You'll notice that you will want to start to cast Lava Burst even if you are at Maelstrom cap while you're in Ascendance or if you have a Lava Surge proc. This just yields more DPS and you don't want to waste those Lava Surge procs because you're going to be getting a lot of them with these builds. So this also just brings your Primordial Wave off cooldown faster. You also really don't need to worry about maintaining your Electrified Shocks debuff on your target because in our raid builds, Ice Fury and Frost Shock are just filler spells. You should always want to cast and prioritize Lava Burst and Elemental Blast or Earth Shock as much as possible over these Electrified Shocks debuff uptime, and just maybe hope that they line up if it does happen that you could cast a Frost Shock, right? Lightning Bolt is also a filler spell, but you'll be casting it very infrequently. if you perform the rotation properly, or I guess the spell priority properly, and in its simplest form, make sure to use Primordial Wave and just press Lava Burst and Elemental Blast or Earth Shock, and you will do just fine in Raid, I swear. If in your opener you get an Ascendance proc, by the way, before your first Elemental Blast, just cast Lava Burst and don't worry about overcapping your Maelstrom. It's fine until you're out of Ascendance, and then continue with the rest of your, I guess, your opening rotation. This proc is rare, but extremely good when it happens in your opener, so it's quite a lot of burst. For council fights, you will be maintaining your single target rotation on up to 3 targets. This will be, of course, a lot of fun watching all of these Lava Bursts fly out on every target when your Primordial Wave cleave windows are up and in effect. And then for cleave and AoE scenarios in raid encounters, you want to make a case to swap out Elemental Equilibrium for maybe Liquid Magma Totem, in which case you will be saving your Primordial Wave spell for when the adds spawn and you drop the Liquid Magma Totem to spread all of your Flame Shock spells very quickly and then Lava Burst out. More Flame Shocks obviously means more Lava Burst, and Liquid Magma Totem helps with that, so keep that in mind. For your AoE or Mythic Plus opening spell sequence, you're going to be first pre-casting Fire Elemental and Stormkeeper. Do not use these charges right away. You're going to want to spread Flame Shock, so then you're going to be using Liquid Magma Totem to apply 3 Flame Shocks. Use Totemic Recall to reset Liquid Magma Totem, and use your second Liquid Magma Totem to apply more Flame Shocks. But it's important that this second Liquid Magma Totem is not placed directly on top of the first one. You kind of want to offset them so that it applies new Flame Shocks to new targets. Then you'll cast your Primordial Wave, and if you still need an additional Flame Shock, if you're not at your maximum number, which is 6, then you would find a target and cast Flame Shock on that 6th target before you cast your first Lava Burst to use all of your Primordial Wave Lava Burst, and then following your normal priority rotation for AoE. When it comes to AoE, your goal is to maintain at least 6 Flame Shocks at all times and just kind of like fish for Ascendance procs. Your Primordial Wave damage contribution is going to be quite a big factor, so you're going to be casting it often with how many Lava Bursts you're able to get out and reduce the cooldown on that through rolling magma. Also, ideally, you'll want to use or spend your Stormkeeper charges with Lava Beam while you're in Ascendance instead of sending them right away. So it's important to not use them right away in your opener and kind of like fish for Ascendance procs while I guess you have the buff active. If it's going to run out, then send the Stormkeeper charges with regular Chain Lightning. That's fine. But ideally, you want to be in Ascendance with Lava Beam. It happens quite often that you are able to use these on a Lava Beam, by the way, so don't fret. Basically, cast Lava Burst whenever you have a Lava Surge available to buff your next spell cast with Master of the Elements and reduce Primordial Wave cooldown as much as possible through rolling magma, like I mentioned. And in its current tuning, Earthquake is actually doing less overall damage than Lava Burst in AoE scenarios, which is quite strange, Blizzard. So hopefully they get us tuning so that it becomes way more impactful and a higher damage contributor, I guess. But with Earthquakes, you will be casting it quite often. Enough thanks to the sheer amount of Maelstrom generation that we get just from Lava Burst alone. So just make sure that this is buffed with both Master of the Elements and Magma Chamber most of the time when you cast Earthquake. Otherwise, as filler, be casting Chain Lightning, and hard cast Lava Burst is fine as well. For your Mythic Plus build, single target priority. So this also works on obviously bosses that we use, like a Spread Cleave, Windspeaker's Lava Resurgence build, like the build that we use for Council of Dreams. This would also apply to that. So you'll see the spell priority on screen here, but in Mythic Plus, Windspeaker's build rotation is extremely simple. You will want to mainly cast Lava Burst and Earth Shock while filling your cast with Lightning Bolt if you have nothing else to cast. It's very easy to maintain your rotation while moving because of how many instant cast spells that you get from this build thanks to Windspeakers and the Lava Surges that we get. So mainly you want to prioritize casting Lava Burst with Lava Surge procs and try to lower the cooldown on Primordial Wave as much as possible, just like we would in our single target kind of raid builds. Casting Earth Shock will also give us a Lava Surge, like I mentioned, thanks to Windspeaker's Lava Resurgence, so you need to be careful not to overcap your Lava Burst charges and waste them. Just make sure to cast all your Lava Bursts before you Earth Shock, and make sure that your Earth Shock is being buffed by Master of the Elements, which is pretty easy to do. Pretty easy. Stormkeeper charges in single target should pretty much only be used with the Surge of Power buff. Makes it so that the Lightning Bolt does an additional 1 to 2 overloads, or I think it's 1 to 3 elemental overloads. So when you are going to be using your Stormkeeper in single target, just make sure you have enough Maelstrom to buff your Earthshock with Master of the Elements, and then use the Earthshock, get Surge of Power, use that Surge of Power buff on a Stormkeeper powered Lightning Bolt, Lava Burst again into another Earthshock to give you Surge of Power, and then the second Lightning Bolt for Stormkeeper. Like I said, just make sure you have enough Maelstrom to do these two things. Then simply cast Lightning Bolt if you have nothing else to do in single target. All right, add-ons and Weakauras. Some stuff that I would recommend that you guys use. Obviously, number one being a Maelstrom tracker or a cooldown tracker or ability tracker, right? So I would recommend using some sort of tracker that makes it so that you're not overcapping or wasting your Maelstrom or your resources, something that can be in the center of your screen to easily see, so you're not also staring at your bars the entire time. Being able to track this just helps you play better, and by preparing your next few casts in advance, you know what you're going to be doing. So I myself have switched over to the Afner's Shaman package, which I'll be leaving in the description of the video down below for you. This package also helps you keep track of like buffs on your character, debuffs, your cooldowns, so you're not staring at your bars like I mentioned. It's fantastic. Another thing that helps you with your UI, I would say, is like plater nameplates. A great fully customizable UI enhancing add-on. This allows you to create your own nameplates or customize them for players and enemies, which is great for organizing the information on your screen in a more coherent manner. There is a lot going on in World of Warcraft nowadays, so it can be very overwhelming. All the information that's on your screen, you can be blinded essentially and not know what the hell's going on. So a cleaner UI helps alleviate all that noise. Details. Yes, we all want to see the big numbers on the screen and make sure that we are beating our friends in the overall damage in dungeon, although for Elemental Shaman, it's a little hard to beat Demon Hunters and Beast Mastery Hunters. Yikes. But more than that, right? Details helps keep track of things like crowd control, damage taken, interrupts, dispels, like you name it. Buff up time, stuff like that. It's extremely useful for data and analytics. So being able to see all these stats helps you be aware of what you need to improve on as a player outside of just your damage. So consider looking more closely at your team's or yourself's overall performance in dungeons instead of just the damage. Another one, I guess, would be Omni CD. This add-on allows you to track your party members like cooldowns, like super useful for when you're in organized groups and you see that your group has offensive or defensive spells along with their interrupts. And overlapping things or overlapping defensives, overlapping interrupts is not good, and it can be extremely punishing this season. So it's nice to be able to track those things and communicate with your team as much as possible. So Omni CD is a really good one for that. Obviously, another one is Bigwigs. This add-on helps you with boss timers for abilities in raids and notifications for mechanics in dungeons as well. You'll want to pay attention to some of that stuff, obviously, so you don't die or kill somebody else. In-game, it tracks a whole lot of stuff and it's useful, so I recommend trying it out. I switched over to Bigwigs from DBM, and it's just something that I prefer a lot more. Plus, you kind of need something like that for pull timers now, right? Another really good Weakaura package, I would say, is the Dungeon Ability Weakaura package. This helps you get your, I really want you guys to get your hands on this Weakaura package because it helps you track enemy spells and their cooldowns. So things that like need to be interrupted or stunned or something, you know that they're coming off cooldown soon, so you can prepare for that, or you can communicate with your team on who has the next available stop for that spell. This will usually issue like warnings and stuff that are important for these abilities, so really easy to react to them once you have that information on your screen. So I'll leave a link to that Weakaura package in the description of the video as well. All right, tips for Mythic Plus. I guess like a staple tip that I have for you guys is when it comes to putting on your earthquakes, I recommend using @cursor macros. You can use this type of macro for any type of like ground targeted abilities, not even for just shamans, right? So this includes most of your totems like Capacitor, Earthbind, and especially Liquid Magma Totem. This macro helps you save that like extra second of like having to point your mouse and then click on the ground where you want that ability to go. You'll want to place a spell just where your cursor is currently located, which is fantastic. This leads me into leading your earthquake. That's another tip. So like a sniper is like a sniper leads his shot on a moving target, your tank is going to be moving around a lot, right? Or at least most of them will be. So to make the most out of your Earthquake spell, because it's an outdated, ground targeted, it's probably one of the worst designed abilities still in the game. Ground targeted AoE ability, oh my gosh. You'll definitely want to consider placing your Earthquake in the path that the tank is either kiting or on the tank themselves. So this is to ensure that while the mobs are moving through the Earthquake, that most of the Earthquake's damage is going to be being applied to them as they pass through it. Another tip is to use your utility spells and use them often. You should be the highest on interrupts in the group at the end of the dungeon. You have the shortest kick in the game. There's really no excuse. So communicate with your group on when you can help alleviate some pressure off the tank and healer as well with your other utility spells like Earth Elemental, Capacitor Totem, Earthbind if he needs to start kiting, right? Ancestral Guidance as a defensive or like a throughput healing ability when you're within your burst windows is another really good one. So normally Earthquake can actually take off a lot of pressure on your tank, and it can help your tank set up kind of like big pulls. This also makes it so that he doesn't have to commit so many of his cooldowns to set up these big pulls as some tanks have to do. So just be careful when you're using Earth Elemental though, if you have some melee in your group, to not screw them over with frontal abilities. When you use Earth Elemental and it taunts everything, maybe you are on the opposite side of the tank, so all the mobs turn around and maybe they use a frontal ability in your melee's face. That's not good. Be careful with those things. You should be using some kind of tracker anyway to see when the abilities are coming out, so you don't do that, but I've done it before in the past. I am guilty. I'll end it there. Alright guys, this concludes the Elemental Shaman Season 3 guide. I really hope that you guys liked it. I'm super excited to get this content out for you. Let me know what you guys think of Elemental Shaman down below in the comment section. It is extremely fun to play right now, but it is doing way less damage than it should be because of being brought out back and just battered into the ground with the tier set nerfs with no compensation at all. Anyway, I digress. Thank you so much for watching. Yes, I'm still mad about that. Like the video if you like it, subscribe for more content, hit the noti bell for when I release new content. Let me know what you guys would like to see in the future for content that I put on my YouTube channel. And don't forget to support my content if you'd like over on Patreon and my Twitch page, twitch.tv/Barokoshama, where I stream pretty much every day. All the links to that and my social media accounts will be in the description of the video down below. Thank you again so much for watching. Until next time, keep calm and Maelstrom on. Bye-bye.